I'm Jonathan Gerwitz, Vice President of KGB Texas Communications, and welcome to thePoint. Joining us today is Glenn Hammer, the President and CEO of the Texas Association of Business. Glenn, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be on thePoint, thank you.
Glenn, you arrived in Texas back in March after a long tenure as the CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce. What are your priorities as you take over Texas Association of Business? What are your priorities for the organization?
Well, first I'll say it's a privilege to have a chance to be at the head of the Texas Chamber of Commerce. One thing I was misinformed on, Texas is not a state, it's a country.
Right.
And Texas right now is the center of the free market system. It's the most functional, dynamic economy in the world. And the first thing we want to do is make sure we protect it. Certainly there's always room to advance and improve. But when you look at the fact that so many people are coming from all over the country and all over the world here, Texas and the legislators, Republicans and Democrats, have done something really right. And as the head of the Texas State Chamber, working with chamber partners and great organizations like 2036 across the state, we want to keep Texas as the #1 state for commerce in the country.
So you're taking over at an interesting time. Businesses are facing challenges with supply chains, with the recruitment and retention of employees. What role can TAB play in helping businesses address those challenges?
Well, it's the meat and potato issues. So the workforce. So I probably am the chamber person in the country who has visited more in person with chamber leaders. And what do I hear? We need to make sure that the education system is aligned to the challenges. Now, when you talk about the supply chain issue, it's a little bit of a broader situation. It's not just Texas, not just the United States, it's the entire world. But I do think that education and good policies that make sure that we incentivize people to work and people and manufacturers to produce are part of that equation.
And despite the challenges, like you said, Texas is a great place to do business. What is it about Texas that makes it so attractive right now?
Yeah, it's a great, and this is one, I still probably have my tourism visa being here 9 months. Being an outsider, I have a little bit of a different perspective. It's a few things. One, it's the low tax, light regulatory. So on the business side, there's a sense that there is bipartisan support for the fundamentals that have made Texas great. What I found in Texas is that there's a lot of craziness in DC. We all know that. The gravitational pull of what's going on in DC is not carried forward in Texas. There's a lot more independence here. I think the other thing that gets lost is that this is just a great place. I mean, the people in Texas are extremely welcoming, and it's with follow through. It's something special that's going on here in Texas.
So we just had we're finishing out 2021 was a legislative year. We had a regular session, we had 3 special sessions. What were some of the wins? What were some of the things that didn't go so well for business during those sessions?
Two of the big wins had to do with providing a COVID liability protection for businesses, schools, hospitals, churches, nonprofits, you name it. That was a big win, and that was a bipartisan win. I'd say another win was abusive trucking litigation.
Right.
If just driving around Texas, you see a lot of billboards up. Some are stuck in my mind. Now, what does that mean practically? We heard from a lot of small businesses across the state that their insurance premiums have been going up 200-300%. So the Texas legislature, again, in a bipartisan way, helped address that issue. And final things, in the 3rd special session, and I knew that Texas met every other year. I didn't realize it was special sessions. You could keep it going.
That doesn't always happen, no.
You can keep it going, but in the 3rd special session, the business community rallied around having part of the funding, $7.3 billion, go to backfill the state's UI fund that was really depleted in large part because of the pandemic.
Unemployment insurance.
I'm sorry, unemployment insurance.
Yeah. So anything that the leadership in the legislature didn't get right, or maybe made Texas a little less attractive for business?
Well, the thing that we're going to have to work on, it still exists as we speak, but something called Chapter 313 incentives is a big deal. And one of the things that's basically a big economic development tool that helps reduce the property tax burden for massive capital projects. These incentives have been very, very important in helping Texas land these mega projects. That very important tool is going to end in December 2022. So we're going to have to work across the aisle, across chambers, across different groups to put together what will probably be a new tool, because 313 does and did have some issues. They need to be addressed, and that's going to be a big ticket item for us.
What priorities do you have and does TAB have for the next session?
Well, one of the things that I do feel is really important is that we make sure that the K through 12 system is aligned with the higher education system. They need something post high school. Now, it doesn't have to be a 4-year degree,
Right.
but what we really are going to need to do is make sure that our K through 12 system has students adequately prepared so that they could jump on and do the next thing. And I do think part of that is being a little bit more intentional when it comes to the high school years to make sure, what are kids doing in those years? Are they taking college credits? Are they getting industry certifications? So I do believe we need to put more effort into that, and that's something that I expect that the state chamber will work with other great groups to achieve.
Congress, or the Senate, is now looking at the reconciliation bill. There's a lot of concerns about what the debt means for our economy, what rising inflation means. When you look at the national outlook, what are your concerns?
Gravely concerned. I believe it's the most serious piece of legislation, the most misguided serious piece of legislation that ever passed the U.S. House of Representatives. It was not terribly well thought out.
Right.
You know, a week or so before, the House and Senate passed a bipartisan real infrastructure package, and that's something that we will be working on at the Texas State Chamber to make sure that out of that $1.2 trillion that we're adequately using those funds. So what's the problem with the social welfare bill as it now stands? Well, it's probably about $5 trillion. We have about a $30 trillion debt. It creates all sorts of new entitlements when our existing entitlements, like Social Security, like Medicare, are under enormous stress. And it also creates all sorts of incentives or disincentives when it comes to traditional energy, oil and gas, and doesn't necessarily thoughtfully think through the energy transition.
Right.
So that bill, our hope is that that bill does not go through in anywhere near its current form, and I don't believe that the bill as it passed the United States House of Representatives will pass the Senate. So we'll probably get another crack at it in terms of advocacy world, in terms of looking at whatever product comes out of the Senate and making a determination as to how we should best approach it in terms of our communications with the 36 House members in the Texas congressional delegation.
Great. Well, Glenn Hammer, President and CEO of the Texas Association of Business, a belated welcome to Texas.
Thank you.
Thanks for visiting with me today, and thank you for joining us on The Point.